This episode of the Instant Speed Podcast is also brought to you by TCG Player. Uprising is the newest draftable set of Flesh and Blood, filled with fiery ninja attacks, summoning those phoenix flames, invoking fierce dragons, or flinging chilling arcane damage towards unsuspecting opponents. This latest set is high-powered addition to the world of Wraith. Now, kickstart your journey with the legendary Dragon Collection, exclusively available at TCG Player. In it, you get 2 boxes of Uprising, all of the 3 unique Dragon Shield themed Dragon Shields, and an exclusive full art promo card with the sleek collector box. These bundles will sell out fast and are only available at TCG Player. Don't get mired in frostbite. Use the link in the description and pick up your boxes before the draconic fire burns up your opportunity to own this exclusive collection. Use those links in the description to support the podcast. Go ahead and score that exclusive bundle before they turn to ash. This is the Instant Speed Podcast, episode number 39. Our guest today will be Hayden Dale of Australia. But before we get to that, I got to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FABDB.net, your premier source for deck building tools, collection management, and simulated booster drafting. You can upgrade your account at FABDB.net and get access to all of those awesome features and bring your game to the next level. But before we get to Hayden, let's talk about the facts, ladies and gentlemen, starting out with the fact that, hey, Uprising is out everywhere. Everywhere. The wait is over. People have their grubby little hands on all the cards. The CC format is starting to take shape, and we're going to talk about that a little bit with Hayden as we move forward. But how about these packs, these juiced boxes? Lots of great pictures that are all about there. But how about this one from our friend DM Armada? A fabled and a legendary in one pack. Can you do better than that? That is the question, friends. So if you've got some sick pack openings, send them my way, and we'll show you just how nasty and greasy these Uprising packs can get. How about a calling that was just announced for Singapore? The Singapore calling is coming on August 20 to 21st, and there is a really cool playmat that's exclusive to this calling. Real nice. I know there's a lot of people who love to collect playmats, and this one is certainly going to be beautiful to add to the collection. The FAB Fitness Challenge, as proposed by one Brendan Patrick of Arsenal Pass, is well underway. I am certainly one of the people who are trying to do my best to better myself and improve my wellness overall, be it physical, right there. Yeah, that's awful. And mental as well. So lots of walks, good eating, and just taking care of myself and taking care of yourself. So we've got that going on in the Discord, which is another thing I want to invite you to. If you have not joined the Instant Speed Podcast Discord, there's a lot of things going on there, including Box Break Trivia Night, where we open cases and boxes and do some trivia with some prizes. There's also deck discussion, wellness challenge discussion, and just overall a bunch of stuff. Not to mention a tournament that I'm looking to put together with some fun prizes and stuff as well. But hey, big thanks again to all of our Patreon members. You guys really keep the lights on here, so thank you so much. Again, 3 tiers of Patreon goodness up for grabs. You go to patreon.com/instantspeedpod. For as little as $1 a month, you can give me a pat on the back and say, hey, we like what you do, and I know that a lot of you have already done that, and it means the world to me. So thank you so much. We have Hayden Dale on the program today, so buckle up. Instant Speed number 39 is coming your way. The Instant Speed Podcast is always brought to you by FABDB.net. It is your premier source for deck building tools, collection management, and simulated booster drafting. It is the place to go to build your deck, theorize, and just improve your gameplay. Go to FABDB.net. Upgrade your account to premium and get access to all of these high-quality tools to bring your game to the next level. FABDB.net. The Instant Speed Podcast is ecstatic to welcome back one half of the Arsenal Pass podcast. He's a skilled player on the competitive scene whose decks are often the first that people seek out to get their own competitive advantage. So welcome back to Instant Speed, Hayden Dale. How are you, buddy?
I'm great, Flake. Thanks for having me back. I'm joining the Two Timers Club, so
Yes.
very honored.
Yes, I've had this discussion. I think it was with Logan Peterson prior to this, and a few others who had been on the show twice. And I don't know if you're like a Saturday Night Live fan or whatnot, but there's an exclusive club within Saturday Night Live, which is like I think it's like the Five Timers Club. Whoever has hosted the show 5 times, very exclusive. But the Two Timers Club, you are in here, which doesn't sound like a very nice club to be called the Two Timer. Like, is that? It's got some negative connotation to it, but. Yeah, I suppose the crown will then go to whoever's third. But yeah, you are within a very exclusive group. How do you feel about that particularly?
Well, we can look down the line, 5 years time, and there'll be a Five Timers Club, and then I'll be looking towards that. I'm a competitive guy. I want to be up there. No, it's great. Thanks for having me on. I mean, again, just in terms of what you've been doing with your podcast, sort of with the community is a huge part of what the community is now. Obviously, you're known as the face of casting. That's what I'm saying. Don't worry about Ten and Grace. You're the face of casting in Flesh and Blood. So, and then of course having so many guests come on to Instant Speed, and it's a part of the I don't know, it's a part of what Flesh and Blood is now.
I feel sometimes that I'm just a little bit too lucky when it comes to these things because this started out as a rocky road where coming from another game, and I often feel as if you're not there at the ground level, if you're not there at sort of as patient zero when it comes to content, it's usually an immensely difficult uphill battle. And I actually tweeted out today, I was like, this is episode 39, and it was around episode 6 or 7 where traction was difficult. I think I had essentially just squeezed out as many favors as possible to get people on the show. And I had detractors who were saying you should probably just pack it in. Like, why waste your time on something like this? And I said, "Oh, give me a bit." And then I think it was with the James White interview that we kind of just propelled ourselves a little bit more into not just the mainstream or into people's ears, but the fact that there's actual legitimate conversation being had here. So I do appreciate that. And you're one of those people who earlier on, you came on the show within our first 15 episodes, and you definitely meant a lot. And you yourself as a podcaster, did you have the same? I mean, this is obvious. This is not on the show notes or anything, but I'm really curious because a lot of people always have the issue of when they start, it's tough, and I always preach to stay with it and work hard. But what kind of not roadblocks, but speed bumps and hindrances and challenges did you and Brendan face earlier on, and where are you now in retrospect?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Of course, James White's a pretty good headliner, so
it's like getting the Rolling Stones at your backyard concert, frankly.
Yeah, we're welcome down to the pub tonight. No, I think for us it was we were early adopters, like you say, so there's a really big advantage in that, no doubt. I think the first sort of half a dozen episodes, though, really uphill battle. Adoption is hard to get people to listen, but I think if you have a product that people want to hear, and I say product, I mean because at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is, right? Is you have to think about it a little bit commercially in the sense that it needs to have a structure that people want to spend some time some of their precious time to use and listen to. And I think we wanted to make sure that every time we took someone's time that we gave them something back, and that was a big part of it for us. And I think when you do that and you have a really clear idea, if it's meant to be and it's the right sort of like I say, product for people and they want to listen to it, then they're going to. And word of mouth is really important in this community, and I think that's I think for both of us, that's what's kind of happened, right?
Yeah, word of mouth is definitely a key element to it. I think a lot of the discussions that occur for Flesh and Blood, I mean, there's the Discord groups and whatnot, but there's no sort of digital outlet. There's nothing really going on where people can just kind of, it has to be off of word of mouth. Like Twitter seems to be the number one space where people kind of, throw things back and forth. And that's where I found out the other big news, which is that you are engaged. You are officially off the board. You are pack one, pick one for somebody out there. And talk to us about the engagement a little bit over here and your fiance.
I like that analogy, pack one, pick one. That's a good one. Yeah, so just recently got engaged. Very exciting. For us, actually, we've been together almost 11 years. So it's people keep saying the first response I'm getting from a lot of people is it's about time or finally. So it's hard to win them all, but no, it's obviously a very exciting time for us. We sort of have told our friends and family in the past couple of weeks. We kind of went on a little bit of a different journey together. We decided to like design the ring together and everything. So we kind of decided back in the start of the year that we were gonna do this. It was the right time in our lives to get engaged and you know, I guess a wedding will be down the track in the future. But yeah, we went about designing the ring together, and then over the past kind of couple of weeks have just kind of told our friends and family, and then yeah, that's kind of been the journey really. It's obviously been a very exciting one. And it's nothing changes for us, right? Like we've been together for so long, my fiance and I, and she's obviously the biggest part of my life. So it's great though to have this kind of like celebration between our friends and family.
Well, Brendan doesn't need to hear that. I'm sure he might think otherwise. But like I was just looking at the pictures. And, yeah, he's Pack 1 Pick 2. It's no problem. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still get some bombs with Pack 1 Pick 2. But just looking at those pictures, one thing I got to say about the pictures is it looks like you just told her name is Devin, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
It looks like you've told Devin the funniest freaking joke that I am so like, because it looks like she's just having a ball like the whole time. So they're very endearing, and again, massive amounts of congratulations. I cannot wait to sing at your wedding. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be incredible, dude. I'm just telling you.
Likewise. No, I mean, to be honest, the photos that you're talking about, I very, very luckily have a friend who is in the Flesh and Blood community here in Sydney who was able to do photos short notice, because I'm obviously quite unorganized, and I messaged him a week prior, knowing that he is a wedding and engagement photographer, and said, hey, what are you doing next week? And to be honest, Devon's just laughing about how awkward I am the whole time. So I didn't even need to tell a joke. I just be myself, and that's funny enough, apparently, just looking at me. So
hey, if she finds that endearing, like just latch onto that. I'm glad that you locked that down. So good for both of you. I'm very, very happy for you both. Now, moving on to obviously less important things, but still on people's radar, which is here we are. We're well removed from essentially the initial release of Uprising, and I just want to get into a little bit about the ebb and flow of Limited. And myself, who adores limited format, I've played a bunch of Sealed. I've drafted a ton, and what I've noticed, and this could just be me, and I definitely want you to chime in on this, but it seems like there's definitely an evolution of what's best, and people seem to kind of be leaning certain ways. Fi was the early favorite until Icelander were starting to win a lot and having a lot of success because of Fi's prominence. Dromai was kind of put to the side, and then suddenly Icelander was no longer everybody's favorite, and now Dromai is having its day in the sun. Do you feel that there is going to be some sort of settling on this, or do you feel like this is going to be constantly in flux?
You know what? It's one of the greatest questions about Limited, and I don't know how familiar you are with Limited and other games. I know at least a reasonable amount, obviously based on what you just said. But one of the great things I love about Limited formats is that they have their own metagames that evolve as the set releases, as you go through events, as you go through adoption of players playing the set. And one of the coolest things, I think, so I can compare it to the last set, I think, we saw a metagame. You take the calling series that happened in North America with the limited formats, and you saw this, right? The first kind of was like, okay, Briar is like the way to everyone's drafting Briar, trying to like build these Lightning Briar decks, these Earth Briar decks, Bramble Sparks, pack one, pick one. People are really emphasizing this. And then people discover this way to play Ultim, which is like, actually, we can draft Ultim and we can just like fatigue these Briars in this draft format. And then people move on to just understanding how strong Lexi is, but also because of the prominence of Briar and Ultim, Lexi just naturally gets underdrafted at tables, and players start to work out, well, what's the best, like, if I'm one of two Lexi drafters, how can I exploit that? And we see these, crazy 15 damage dominate turns and things like that. And that's what's that's what's already happening in this format, right? Is there is a metagame evolving. And I think one of the biggest parts of it, and it happens in the last format as well, is the low-hanging fruit will always be picked first in limited formats because it's the easiest to understand. And I think Fi is that, right? Fi, in terms of, I don't think there's really archetypes in this limited format, but there's more around how you build and play the heroes with a certain goal in mind. And Fi's gameplay and sort of play patterns are a lot more simplistic, I would say, than, say, Dromai, for instance, which I think is a lot more difficult. So, I think that's why we see the adoption of Fi early, and then Icelander makes sense. It naturally kind of preys on Fi, reducing resources, flipping Frostbite tokens, taxing hands with cards like Aether Ice Vein, things like that. And then Dromai is kind of, in some ways, a natural counter to that, and in some ways, but then also I think is just the most complex of the three heroes to both draft, build, and actually play, because it looks on the surface like you want to be doing one thing, when in reality, I think that's not necessarily true. So yeah, I mean, I love this limited format, and I think we're starting to see it develop already quite quickly. And I think in terms of like, will it settle? Yeah, it'll settle. I think by the time we get to the Pro Tour, the players playing at the Pro Tour, players playing in Utrecht and Singapore will understand the limited format and have ideas about how to play probably most of the three heroes, or two of the three heroes.
Bringing it back to Tales of Aria, I like that you did that, because I was about to make that comparison where it was Briar the whole way. Like you mentioned, Bramble Spark, you see it, you grab it, you go nuts with it. Red lightning cards, and just building as close to kind of a red Cheerios deck as you possibly can. Eventually, what occurred was people started, like you mentioned, realizing that everybody was going to be drafting Briar. Might as well focus on something else. And Lexi, being the least favorable for many, having a weapon that does nothing, if in bad spots, was kind of tough. But I mean, let's be real. If you knew what you were doing, like you said, a couple overfluxes and a dominated arrow, being able to push through damage, especially against an Oldhim with a dominate effect, was like clutch. Like having Shiver was not a bad thing. And just the fact that there's like you said, a unique metagame exclusive to this, and reading signals. Like, these are skills that I have yet to develop. I've drafted a ton. I've had, like, under my belt across various titles, I have like 1,000 drafts of Fab and Magic and Gwent and all kinds of other games. But man, it's like, it just seems to me like this is a skill that truly separates good players from complete elite players. What is the importance of being a good limited player, of having an understanding of that in the competitive landscape?
I think it's meant less so far, to be honest, because we just haven't had these high-level limited events. The calling series that happened in North America was kind of the first time at the end of the back end of 2021 was the first time we'd said, okay, limited is important in this game. Up until then, it was really a constructed game, right? That was the focus. And I think as we headed into, and I think that changing point was Tales of Aria. I think Tales of Aria Draft in particular was a very, very good format, and sort of showcased how good a limited format you could have in Flesh, but how deep it can be, how important, these skills you just listed are: reading signals, sending signals, which reading signals is always more important than sending signals, but both important things in their own right. And the ability to craft and maneuver a draft. Like, these are, and people always do them in different ways. And I think one of the biggest things is actually developing that skill set is you have to be quite pragmatic about it. I think you have to approach it with the idea that you are going to try and develop these skill sets and work on it one by one. But I think the great thing is that we are going to see it become more and more important in this game. It hasn't been that important so far, I would say, a couple of callings here and there, but now we're heading into the first Pro Tour that has a limited piece of it. Obviously Nationals as well. And I think sort of we're going to just continue to see it be important, to the point where I'm sure we continue to get more limited callings, and even, maybe one day we get a fully limited Pro Tour. We'll see.
A fully limited Pro Tour seems ambitious. I love it too, don't get me wrong. And it makes for a more unique experience as a caster, obviously for the audience as well, people who are consuming it. But I think that it's a necessary element to truly crown who the best in the world are. Are you a pro, or are you just good at CC? Like, did you spike a CC tournament, a Pro Quest, or are you truly the real deal? And I think that having it integrated, I think that I've asked this to many different people within the community, competitors, casters, everybody, and the real response that I'm getting is that it is a necessary fact, or a necessary element to any competitive tournament on that scale. Like, those tier 1 tournaments like Pro Tours and Worlds need to integrate both to truly form a complete player, and to truly crown, because the player that just can find the right CC deck, bring it to a tournament, and crush through, are they good at one element, or are they good at the game? Because the game, spans different things. Now, obviously, you can kind of spread that around and say, well, what about Commoner? Or what about Blitz? Or what about this or that or whatnot? But I feel like having a constructed element and a puzzle-solving limited element together is the future, in my opinion, of how a true card game champion should be.
I think for crowning a world champion and a national champion, I completely agree. I think where you're trying to say, okay, who is the best at this one particular time in both disciplines of flesh and blood, limited and constructed, I think perfect, right? World Championship, nationals, I think should always be split format. I think they should never not be, because I completely agree. You want to see both elements of that complete player come and say, like, I did it in both formats. Because if you go to Pro Tour Lille or you go to your national championship this year and your draft is ropey, you are going to struggle. And yes, you might be able to, maybe you can 3-3 your draft and you 6-0 constructed and you make top 8. But that is so much harder than having a really solid draft and a solid constructed deck and being able to, rely on both, as opposed to being like, well, I just have to get a little bit lucky in draft and I have to make sure I have the best constructed deck and the best play to go through. So that, like you say, that does naturally reward it. The one thing I will say, I think, is that we have ELO rating for ELO boards, which we're going to use at some point for limited and constructed. And I think crowning, or saying like any particular player is the best constructed player in the world and the best limited player in the world is quite a cool thing as well. I think being known for your discipline, if you ever followed Magic the Gathering, we had limited specialists who were some of the, the brilliant minds of limited, but maybe that didn't always translate to constructed deck building and constructed play and vice versa, right? Maybe some of the best deck builders in the world or the best constructed players from a technical standpoint, but, draft just didn't really click with them. And I think I like that aspect of having two. So I wouldn't be afraid of having, I'm glad we had a fully constructed Pro Tour. I think that shows who are the best constructed minds out there, who are the best constructed players. And then maybe we could do that for limited. But I think the vast majority of the higher end events like Worlds, like Nationals, and maybe majority of the Pro Tours should be split format, like you say.
And it's just more entertaining, in my opinion. And
that's fair.
The fact you're saying, like, getting a little bit lucky, I think there's a common misconception that, like, I've heard it, I don't want to say complained about, but that's what it was, is when somebody kind of, goes X2 in their, loses their first 2 rounds of a draft and say, well, I didn't get anything good. Well, I mean, like, the people, yeah, you had the opportunity to get all kinds of good things. Like your pack 1 and your pack 2 and your pack 3, there's probably 3 good cards that you could have had that you can build around. How many people pass you a red scar for a scar that you just pass over because you want something a little bit more flashy? The amount of decks that win tournaments that run 0 Majestics and very limited rares is incredible. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I played Dromai for the first time at an Armory yesterday, a draft. I went 3-0. I had 0 Majestics, and I just had a lot of big 8 attacks and blocked out when I needed to. Like, that was basically all it came down to. Maybe I'm tooting my horn a little bit. I needed to brag to somebody.
You're allowed to.
Thank you, Hayden. I appreciate it.
I mean, I agree. Like, I've heard this, and it's becoming quieter and quieter, this voice or these voices in the community. But there was for a very long time where it's like, limited's a luck-based format, even sealed, which I would disagree with. It's about what you pull, draft is about what you open, it's about like what you get past. Yeah, that is what draft is. But the great thing about draft is you get to influence that by being a player at that table, by being a piece of that pie. And I think limited has the most nuanced skill of any part of a card game, especially the draft itself and how you construct and you manufacture what happens in that draft. And there's sometimes, right, where you draft your seat, you draft it well, and you still end up with like a 2-1 deck. You probably won't end up with a 1-2 deck if you draft your seat well, to be honest, in most drafts. But sometimes you end up with a 2-1 deck. And that's going to happen, right? Because, you got positioned between the Fire player, the Dromai player, you got forced into Icelander, and then there's 2 Icelanders on the far side of the table because of the pack distribution. Like, that will happen from time to time. But the important thing to kind of, I guess, look at when those things happen is, you could say the same about constructed. I got one of my bad matchups. I got one of the matchups paired into that I didn't have a sideboard, I guess a really strong sideboard plan for, because it's less of a share of the meta, or I just have to take this bad matchup with the deck I'm playing. It's no different in limited constructed. I mean, it's different, but it's not so vastly disparaging. It's just a different kind of, I guess, this thought process of how matchups, how metagames work. I don't want to go on a tangent, Flake, but
hey,
metagames.
let's go all the tangents. But hey, you're the one who woke up at like 6 a.m. for me, so you have the reins here to do whatever you want. You're the early riser, so if you want to take the tangent train, buddy, all aboard.
I'm energized. No, just want to talk about metagames for a second. Because I talked about metagame and limited and that it being a real thing, and I truly believe it, and I think a lot of limited players would say that. But the cool thing about, I guess, a metagame in the limited format is that there's only so much of the slice of the pie that you can have, right? Because the card pool is fixed in a draft, so to speak. When that box gets set down on the table, there's a finite number of each card in that box, whether you know it or not, right? In terms of, yeah, you can look at print runs and there's going to be a distribution and you know to some extent the distribution. But when you go to a constructed event, people can play whatever they want. So it's a very different kind of metagame. And I think just getting your head around that is a skill set to know, first of all, like pack distributions, box distributions, in terms of like what to expect in a draft, what it is likely that a table can be supported by the cards that are opened versus what you see in past. Like it is all part of the skill set. And I think what kind of starts with understanding there is a metagame as well involved with both limited.
It just makes me laugh sometimes, like you mentioned, where people are like, well, if people pass me these cards and I'm like, yeah, you've basically just described the rules of draft. Like you cannot you cannot blame the rules of a format for your own, downfall or your own lack of success. That's just excuse making, and we don't have time for that. Your success though in this game has recently been capitalized or has been highlighted by the fact that you won a tournament with Viserai. I believe it was an RTN, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I won on Road to Nationals on Sunday with my boy, as I like to say, Viserai.
Yeah, and you just keep blasting that mofo back onto the radar every single time. Every time that we think it's flatlined and we're about ready to hammer the nails into the coffin, you're like, whoa, we got a heartbeat. And Viserai's resilience is what I want to talk to you about, because you say it's your boy, and to a certain degree, yeah, we get it. You have immense amounts of experience with the deck. We get it. You're awesome as a FAB player in general. Those are two elements. Those are two ingredients in this recipe. But the issue is it just because it's a hero that you like and you're a good player, or is there something there with Viserai that people need to jump on and need to figure out? Because let's be real, at the end of the day, when you're saying it's like, well, it's Dale and Mac on Prism, let's say, or it's Tyler Horspool on Prism, like obviously they're going to succeed or they're going to do well, or it's Matt Rogers on Dash or you on Viserai. Everybody has their sort of main, quote unquote, as it were, like Yuki Lavender on Lexi. We're going to see these players succeed. I can go on and on. I was at Michael Hamilton on Guardian. Either way, long story short, is what is making Viserai so good? Is it you and your experience with the hero capitalizing on an unstable meta, or is there something actually there?
Yeah, I was going to add Brendan Patrick on the favorable matchup, but
Brendan Patrick not on camera, we'll say.
I think, interestingly, and this is maybe my perception, and maybe I've got this wrong, but I don't think I necessarily actually have a hero that I gravitate to or kind of stand for, I guess. I mean, people know that I really do enjoy Reiner. I like the sort of the gameplay, the mechanics, and what Reiner does, but it's very hard to play Reiner on events, so I generally don't, right? And I think Viserai, while I won Nationals with it, I actually haven't really touched it since then. I didn't play it in that Blitz format. I haven't really played it in Constructed in the previous format, maybe a little bit, right? Before they banned Scalata. But yeah, I never really thought myself that way. To be honest, the reason that I picked up Viserai for this event is just a look at the format, what's happening in the format right now. And I do think that Viserai has these tools and the ability to really attack an earlier format at least. And that's why I kind of just put this idea together that was in my head of what this deck could look like. And it is really based around not my love for Viserai as much as I do, as much as I want to play Viserai. It is genuinely more based around the hero ability, Spellbound Creepers, and I think one of the best shells for Belittle that we have right now because of the attack actions that you have access to. That's kind of the simple part of it. And there's a lot of other things around how this kind of a list came about. And to be honest, it's not like a big story or anything. It just is around theory. And one of my kind of basis for deck theory and deck building theory is that I don't start from another Viserai list. It's not like I took my last Viserai list and then built this. This actually was a concept of its own. And then I build that out. That's why this card like Rune Flash and Rattlebones, people are like, oh, you don't play these cards. Why don't you play these cards? And I can't really give an answer other than they don't fit the game plan of the deck. They don't fit what the deck is trying to do. It's not like I had a Viserai deck and then was like, oh, the Rattlebones get cut and the Rune Flash get cut. It was more like, well, they actually just never made it in.
Yeah, they were never part of the original blueprint. A lot of people I find when it comes to deck building are usually very, very much married to particular cards when they think of a hero. It's like, okay, I'm playing this hero. I have to play these cards. Like, they have to be in there. Like, I'm playing Oldhim, I have to play Oakenold, or I have to play, or if I'm playing Bravo, I have to play Crippling Crush or such like that. But if you just kind of disassociate, if you untether yourself from these norms, these pre-existing kind of conditions that you feel exist when you're when you're building a deck, it must open up a lot more space in your mind to play around. I find that whenever I'm a terrible deck builder, I admit it. I'm the type where, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day. If I make 24 decks, 2 of them might be okay, or 2 of them might succeed. I usually rely on smarter people than me. I'm a good pilot. I'm a good student of the game. I'm not the architect, as it were. I've said this before. If you look at airplanes, there are way more pilots than there are engineers building the planes, right? And that's just the way it is. Somebody who, you know, you don't necessarily need to know the nuts and bolts and the aerodynamics, but if you know how to operate it, you can succeed. For yourself, do you find that it's sometimes difficult to sort of liberate yourself from those pre-existing norms when it comes to building a deck, of thinking like, well, if I'm building, you know, Katsu, I have to run Lord of Wind. I have to go down that line. Is it something that you have to consciously, you know, just purge out of your mind and get that blank canvas when you're creating a new deck?
Not overly, to be honest, but I think it's more a mentality standpoint, and this is something I try and, I guess, share with players when they ask about deck building. Like, I don't particularly think I'm an amazing deck builder, for sure. I think I have good ideas, and sometimes those come to fruition, but I don't think my tuning or tweaking is particularly good, which is a big part of deck building. But that aside, I think not really, because one of the main things about Flesh and Blood is that cards, there's so many different sort of ways that cards can interact, and the modal aspect of cards in this game, you know, defense, offense, and pitch value on cards, for the most part, means that there's sometimes, I think we start with this idea that, yeah, you need X, Y, Z, right? These are a given in the deck. But I honestly think if you can shift from that mentality, you're going to become an infinitely way better deck builder, and also probably like tweaker and tuner as well, which is a really important part of this game as well that we don't really talk about. We talk about deck builders, we talk about players, but we don't talk about people who tune and tweak sort of these lists and decks. But I know like a lot of conversation in communities often is like, well, I mean, you just start with this card. Like, I'm deck building, and you just start with this card. And it always used to be that way as well. I was like, well, you just, you know, you're building a new deck, and we're Arcane Rising, or we're in Crucible of War when the card pool's limited. It's like 3 E-Strike, 3 Sink Below, 3 Fate for Scene. All right, where am I going next? And it's like, if we kind of break that mold and start to talk about, well, how can you approach the game from specific interactions, specific patterns you want to play? And actually, if you look at it that way, you go, well, defense reactions don't really fit in my deck. I don't really want these. And I love that in the past, probably 6 to 12 months, the past ProQuest season, even maybe the ProQuest season before that, we started to see players really approach this and go, well, actually, hold on, I don't need defense reactions in my deck if I'm playing an offensive deck that can't utilize them well, or I'm playing this really sort of defensive deck, and, you know, maybe like proactive cards aren't good in this matchup. And I think we're starting to see players really understand the fundamentals of the game a lot more and make these decisions. But yeah, from a mindset perspective, I think if you can kind of get out of that, it's a really big gain for yourself as a player in Flesh and Blood, as a deck builder primarily as well.
One of the most surprising elements for me when you see new decks start to evolve, and as new cards come out. I think it was post Everfest, and I was looking at some deck builds and I was like, E-Strikes and Command and Conquers are now not in deck lists.
Oh.
And that, I think, to me, was the number one indicator that it wasn't just about the fact that, like, well, you just jam in these 8 to 9, you know, for sure cards every time, and then everything else is just whatever. The fact that we've sort of started to see Command and Conquers come back in, but come back out, and you know, like, they're powerful cards, don't get me wrong. I don't think necessarily that they've been power crept out of existence, but I find that their utility has now, you know, seen a situation where they're not always the ideal situation. I mean, a card like E-Strike with its versatility and what it can do is fantastic, but we've seen that sometimes takes a backseat to cards that synergize versus cards that are just, you know, statically good.
Yeah. I mean, utility isn't the be-all and end-all when you're trying to do specific things in a particular deck. And likewise, I think Command & Conquer is actually pretty specific about what it does. You know, it's attacking a certain aspect of the game, and that's not always the right thing to be doing depending on the meta. So, yeah, in all honesty, I think the first cards on my deck sheet are the ones that are going to win me the game, and the ones that are going to be the power or the engine of my deck, and then I'll go from there. And then utility or specific interactions like a way, like a Command and Conquer, a way to attack the game, those will come down the line if they fit.
So the constructed meta now has been essentially established in the sense that the cards are illegal, the bans are out there. You've already done some damage with Viserai once again. How much does are you? Well, first of all, will you be in France at the Pro Tour in France?
I will 100% be in Lille. Yeah.
So I get to see you in France, which is going to be
You do.
exciting. And again, I know it's always great. And I told you last time that you're very sturdy. I didn't know what else word to say. For those who do not know, I believe my first in-person interaction with Hayden Dale was that I think I gave you a hug or something, or I patted you on the back, and I said, "Wow, you're a sturdy fellow."
You walked up and just grabbed my shoulder with a claw.
Yeah, no, yeah, introductions. Look, I meet a bunch of people at every event. It's always the best. I promise you they're never that awkward, but you were somebody who just caught me off guard. I was like, hey, this is a sturdy guy. I don't know what else to say. But when you're at these events, especially ahead of Pro Tour, how much of your preparation and your progress in terms of finalizing a deck, how much is that is kept close to the vest? There are people out there, the Mavericks, like Tariq Patel, who's like, this is what I'm sending, with his knick-knack, bric-a-brac, give a dog a bone nonsense. Like it was just I don't know how much of it was just baiting, but he sometimes is just like, this is what I'm bringing, and I'm fearless in terms of that regard. But in other situations, people are very secretive. They're very private about their progress in terms of developing a deck. How much of you is, in the lab working on this secret contraption that when you show up to other tournaments, you're bringing something completely different? I'm not trying to corner you here for you to reveal what you're playing, but at least the process.
I mean, I couldn't even tell you what I'm playing. I've barely started kind of that process, I think. But it's a great question. And the first thing I want to say is about, Tariq in particular, is that I genuinely believe that from Tariq's standpoint, he had every intention to play that deck. I think, it's not like, I think he was never trying to bait anyone. I don't believe that for a second. So I will say though, I think as content creators and as community members, I guess, that are looked to for information about the format and about how the game is going, like, we do have a responsibility to be really careful about those things, about the things we do say, because they do hold weight. I think it's important to kind of remember that. I think for me, the big part of it is I won't generally start really testing specifically for Lille until probably at least the road to national season is over, I would say. So probably another 2 weeks, that's when I'll start. And then for me, the first couple of weeks are really going to be exploratory. That's kind of how it always is for a format. Like, unless there's something that comes up immediately that, I have this idea and I'm like, this is so, like, I've broken the format, and I haven't done that before. So there's no idea like that I'm going to just kind of lock and key away and sort of immediately start working on for the Pro Tour. It'll be more exploratory. Even this Viserai idea was like, this is kind of the first idea of how to attack the format, and this is the deck that comes out of it. I think it depends, right? So for me, I want to talk about the format as much as possible and talk about my testing and what I'm working on. And that's kind of the other reason I want to start testing later as well, is that I want to be able to talk about the format freely and openly for as long as possible. But then at some point, and it's just the reality of it, realistically, is that as a player first, and as someone who has, I guess, a group that I will be working with for this event, my responsibility no longer becomes just to myself or just to, I guess, the community that I interact with. It also becomes to the players who are going to this event that I'm working with, who want to do well. And so there are some things that then become difficult to talk about, because maybe there's a particular deck in testing that breaks the mold of what's happening in the metagame established. And to be honest, it's something that I really struggle with, and it's something that I've reevaluated and tried to think, well, actually, should I just be working with myself for events? Should I be trying to continue to stay as open as possible when it comes to dialogue? But I think what I'm trying to find is like this kind of middle ground where it's like, I want to talk as openly about the format as I possibly can. I want to try and make sure that I'm not trying to influence people. I never am trying to influence people, but I'm not saying things that could easily influence people about particular decks. I'm not going to go and stand for a deck that I know is not, going to be good in the format, or that I've got a list that I'm working on that would be, able to target that and sort of blow it out and try and sway the format. And I'm actively going to make sure that I try and stay away from those things. And look, it's really difficult. And there's going to be people who I think probably say, you use your position to influence, or you're not going about this the right way. And I completely understand that sort of perspective. And I honestly will try my best. But also, like I say, I'm a player first, and I want to do well at the Pro Tour. And unfortunately, I think, there's certain things that will stay secret, I guess. And I think every team's going to be having that sort of issue, and anyone who is a content creator who is also a player is going to have that issue, depending on what the meta looks like. But I'm going to try and be open and honest about it at least.
It's not like you're pulling a Tark. Tark, sometimes I feel like when he's talking about particular cards where he's like, is this good? Like, is this going in my deck? And then people start buying it out. He like creates this sort of crypto pumping scheme where he's creating like Patel coin, where it comes and just sort of, and then everybody jumps on it and he's like, maybe I was wrong about it. And then just rug pull and it's all gone. Now, the regional metas are also quite important. And like you mentioned, where us as content creators or deck builders specifically within that that sort of field, they are an outlet for people who want, to have a finger on the pulse of what the meta looks like. And I feel that there is, I wouldn't call it a responsibility for people like yourself or others who create decks to sort of give the community a little window into where the meta is headed, but also there's a particular amount of regional meta, and I want to ask you a little bit about how that factors in specifically for yourself. You're in Australia, you're in Canada, North America, specifically Europe as well. Metas are often very, just unique to as broad as a continent to as specific as a 20-kilometer radius amidst a few LGSs around. And like, this is what is played in these 3 stores, but if you scope out, this is what's prominent, and then all around. How different do you find it is to play within your regional meta versus having to prepare afterwards for kind of the more global snapshot of what's going on?
Great question. It's a big question, right? I think that 100%. There's regional metas. There's even store metas, right? Where people start to play certain decks at stores, and then people try and tech for that. And I mean, that's how the game kind of started. I think the competitive aspect of the game started because our first events were skirmish events, right? In terms of things that were actually tangible and worth prizes. I think what is interesting to note is that as you go through a metagame, the larger the event, the spread evens out, right? In terms of, if you say, let's take nationals, right? You might have a state-based metagame or even a city-based metagame, but once you get to a nationals level, that should start to even out at some point in terms of, these little spikes you have in the regionality of your meta should flatten out a little bit to probably more likely just what a global metagame looks like, especially now because we're starting to get a lot more discourse and a lot more content on, I guess, what does a metagame look like? What are the top decks? What are event results? Things like that. But so in the weekend, you look at my Viserai list, I played 10 pieces of equipment. I took 3 Nelrune because there's Kano players in my region. There's Icelander players I know that are going to show up on the weekend. So I make that decision. Would I make that same decision at a Pro Tour or a Calling? Don't know. Maybe not, right? Because the level of the meta game, I guess, in terms of the regionality is a much less influence. So I think it's tough it depends on where you are and what you're playing and what your goals are. I think if your goals are to win a Road to Nationals, you should 100% just be looking at your regional meta and be focused on that. If your goal is to go and win a Calling, well, then you should look at the meta game for that. So I think basically what you need to be doing is just take it metagame by metagame and event by event, to be honest. And that's probably going to yield you the most success.
Now that's where you having like I don't want to call it a spy network, but like a little bit of espionage, a little bit of ear to the floor. You need to kind of know what other people are going, or what they're doing. Networking is so clutch. I think I've mentioned this to several people. I said, you know what? In a game like Flesh and Blood, networking and just hearing as much, absorbing as much information as possible kind of gets you a broader picture. And that's going to be your task, I suppose, in the upcoming, 7 weeks ahead of Pro Tour in Lille. There's
not long now.
There's work to be done. Yeah, 7 weeks sounds like a long time, but I promise you, it is a blink of an eye. Yep. Now let's wrap this up here with your partner there, Mr. Brendan Patrick, has launched quite the initiative. One that he mentioned to me when we were casting together in Ohio at the end of June, just saying like, just chatting amongst each other between games and just talking about each other. That sounds so intimate, but it does. It does. Nonetheless, he was just talking about collaboration, and he told me about he was planning on doing a fitness challenge. I said, yeah, give me the details. And then when push came to shove, it was like, wow, this is dude means business, and the result of it has been stellar. The result of it has been broad and far-reaching and very impactful. A lot of people are way on board, myself included. I haven't touched sugar in a week, and it hurts. Hayden, like, we're not all as chiseled as you and Brendan, but I'm telling you, dude, like, it is tough. And I want to ask you a little bit about perhaps your involvement, first of all, with the fitness challenge, but also, supporting Brendan and just the initiative in general.
I think it's taken on a life that even Brendan didn't expect it to. And I think that's because the community response has been so overwhelmingly positive. And I said to Brendan when he told me about the initiative, I was like, I have some concerns just about, I guess what we're standing for, I guess. But to be honest, the more Brendan talked to me about it, the more on board I was. And I think it's we as a community, I think this is one of the craziest, and when I say crazy, I mean just because it's so amazing, this community that I've ever been a part of, in terms of people are so friggin' nice. People are so supportive of each other. And I think to move away from something that's purely flesh and blood to something that is our lives, to our health, our well-being. And I know people keep saying fitness challenge. For me, I should keep referring to it as like a health challenge. It's like a wellness challenge, because I think it goes beyond just being fit, right? Like one of my big goals this month, and I am participating, is like my sleep schedule. Like I want to be better with my sleep schedule. That is something that I think is impacting my health and my life. So that's a big focus for me. But I have a lot of admiration for what Brennan's decided to do with this, and also just everyone getting on board. I can't believe some of firstly, the amount of people that are getting involved, but then just some of the amazing stories I've heard already of people who are really using this as a moment with the community supporting them to make a change in their life and make a difference. And it actually, it's so cool to see. So I love that I can even be a part of it. I'm no means Brendan is driving majority of this. I am participating. I am there to support, and I'm there to shout it from the rooftops because I think it's an awesome thing to do. But yeah, for me, it's participation, fitness, and I guess like health. And it's like for me, it's been a tough part of my life. I've gone through stages where I was like an overweight kid, an overweight teenager, to someone who played a lot of sport and really focused on, I guess, unfortunately, like body image, because that's just kind of what happened. And I've moved away from that in the past few years. I love being fit. I love the gym. I don't really care about my weight fluctuating or anything like that. I'm more focused on just being fit and happy and healthy. But this month, I'm definitely focused on like my sleep and just like shedding a few kilos. I got a little bit lazy after the pro tour, and my eating's been a little bit out of whack. So I'm calorie counting at the moment to try and just get my eating back, and that'll probably last for 2 months, and then I'll probably feel okay. But no, honestly, I love it, and it's such a good initiative, and I can't wait to see kind of how July goes, see some of the results from some of the community members I'm following, and then also what happens next.
Well, that's a good idea. Is what happens next is what people want to figure out, because the way that I was kind of approaching this as well was it's not necessarily just about aesthetic, losing weight and looking better, but it's about feeling better, and that transcends just the physical aspect. The mental aspect is something that I've struggled with for many years, and it's something that recently I've had a good grip on, and part of that is just being mindful of the fact that your health is important, and cutting out what you feel might be necessary, but really isn't in certain cases. And I mean, the struggle now is like, Dad, I just want chocolate so bad. I just want a cookie so bad. I've allowed myself 2 cheat days for the entire month of July. And every day they're like, just use one now. Just use one now. I'm like, it's the 5th of freaking July. Like, I can't do it yet. You're at the 6th. You're already a day ahead of me.
I'm a day ahead.
Yeah, you're already 6 days into this, mofo, and I'm telling you. So props to everybody. Just in the Instant Speed Discord itself, there are people who are participating, sharing pictures, stories, and seeking support. The way that Brendan mentioned it, he's like communal suffering, and that sounds awful. That sounds terrible. Don't get me wrong, but it's true. When everybody is trying to, is pulling this in the same direction, it may feel uncomfortable, but when you've got people at your back, it's a whole different story. You're a rugby player, right?
I played when I was younger. I'm a soccer player.
A soccer player. Okay. I was gonna try to do a rugby analysis. So let's see, soccer.
We can do rugby.
All right. I was just gonna say, like, when you're in the scrum, you're pushing extra hard because the people behind you are pushing just as hard, and everyone's getting sweaty, greasy, muddy, dirty, bloody, but everybody is pushing for the same goal. So I'm very excited to see where this is headed, and Yeah, it has been tough, but we're all in this together. That's what matters. So
Yeah, I just want to shout out to everyone who is doing that and finding it tough. I can honestly say with all my experience kind of trying to, I guess, stick to eating plans and for competitions and stuff like that for when I used to dance, the first 2 weeks are the hardest. They are the hardest. And no, I won't, like, there's no sugar coating it. And also there's no sugar, sorry. But, but also, like, I think allowing yourself, setting goals is the most important thing because you have something to stick to. If you just kind of go, I'm going to be healthy, it's really, really hard. But if you go, like, I'm not going to have refined sugar for the month, or I'm going to have one, treat a week or whatever it is, like, sticking to that feels so good. You get the reward and, it just feels amazing. So
I got to full stop something here. And this clarifies a lot of the Go Again segment submitted questions about the dancing. Because I got a lot of those, and I was like, I don't understand what the context is here, but I'm sure he'll elaborate. And now I know that you used to be a dancer.
I did, yeah.
Okay, well, you want to give us like a little 60 seconds on this a little bit? Because I'm sure this is news to me, and I always feel like I'm well plugged in. Yeah, I always feel I'm well plugged in. So hit us with a little bit of why Hayden Dale, who Hayden Dale the dancer was, and where you're at with that too. Because this is breaking news for me.
I think I'll give you a quick 30 seconds. Yeah, I mean, since I think I was about 10 or 11, I started dancing, rock and roll dancing, which is, I guess, like a partner dancing kind of style. It's very energetic. I did that all through my teenage years into my early 20s, even up until about 3 years ago. I kind of stopped competing just because, one, COVID, but also logistics was very difficult. But yeah, no, it was a big part of my life. I kind of spent usually most of the year 3 to 5 nights plus some mornings training. So it was a big part of my life, but yeah.
This I think we your first time on the show, I think we mentioned what is your hidden talent, and then you mentioned that you were a dancer. This is all coming back to me now. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Right. And then I asked you about swing dancing, I think a little bit about that, and keeps you fit. There is on my computer, I'm actually right now, hold on, I'm staring at the file right now. There's a video of me in a lip sync competition with 2 other friends of mine doing the entire single ladies dance at a competition in full leotard.
I'd love to see it.
Well, that's the thing, because a lot of people have said they wanted to, but no one has yet convinced me to do so. So if there's...
Good. All right.
Yeah. I'll release it upon the world when the...
Oh, I'll do so. Yeah. Don't worry. For everyone out there, for the Instant Speed listeners, I will convince Flake. Don't worry.
It's going to happen. All right. So that has been the first segment with Mr. Hayden Dale. Hayden, we got another segment called Go Again. Will you join us?
Oh, definitely. I'm ready to go again.
Heck yes. All right. So we will be right back with Hayden Dale and Go Again right after these messages from BCW Supplies. Instant Speed is proudly supported by BCW Supplies. If you need protection for your cards, be it sleeves, deck boxes, storage, organizational tools, or hey, are you a comic book collector, a coin collector? BCW Supplies has your hookup. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off all of your orders. Go to bcwsupplies.com. BCW, protect, store, display. All right, it is time to go wide on one Hayden Dale as we go again on a series of questions, many of these submitted by our wonderful community. If you want to submit a question, you can always tweet at me, join the Instant Speed Discord, or always the Patreon members get a nice priority on these questions, so please go check that out as well. All right, question number 1, Hayden Dale. Is Runeblade just inherently better because of the arcane damage?
Well, split damage is kind of what makes a deck like Viserai or Briar so powerful, I think, particularly why I think Viserai is still good in this format. So I wouldn't say it's... You know what? Yeah, I'll say yes. It is inherently better. Is that the be-all and end-all? Probably not, though.
Yeah, it gets deeper than that, but we'll accept that answer. This one from Greg at Darth Prentice asking, I'd be curious to know how competitively viable Hayden thinks Dromai is and how he would build her.
I think every hero is actually competitively viable, but I like to give them on a scale, and I think for me, Dromai is down the Bolt and Azalea end right now, which is a difficult spot to be. That's my early takes and impressions. I think it's probably better than I think it is. Just talented heroes seem to be that way. But my early impressions that it's going to be very difficult to build this in a way where it interacts with kind of the current thought process of how people are playing Flesh and Blood and Constructed and how the metagame is starting to look. But I could be wrong. In terms of how I would build her, I think I would either be looking at the ends of the spectrum. I would be looking at the super aggressive deck with like sweeping blows, trying to like push things on the opponent, or I'd literally be looking at the most defensive deck possible. That's kind of my early thoughts.
It's funny the way that you mentioned that, you're like, oh, I think everything's competitive, and we just put it on a scale, the bottom of the scale of which is Azalea. And I was like, okay, that's not competitive. It's like, it's a very, very sugar-coated way to say that it's not competitive. You're going to make a great coach down the line and feel, like it's competitive and viable in the way that I am a competitive and viable Premier League soccer player. Like they're viable. It's possible, but I do appreciate the optimism for sure.
Well, I'm a as a soccer player, I'm viable, but I'm not getting called up to Arsenal or Man United anytime soon.
Next one coming from V at Vera Veda, asking, when will the world see or get to see a dance collaboration between you, being me, yourself, Hayden Dale, and Yazi? So that's all three. Hey, that's all three members of Destiny's Child. I'm just saying, I could absolutely relearn the moves to single ladies if you want to.
Never say never. I mean, if we can get us all in a room together, why not? I'd love to see. I didn't know Yazi was a dancer either until recently, so someone told me that. So I'd have to, you know what? Let's do it. Let's first of all, Yazi, come to Lil, and then let's find out.
I think that's a good idea. Otherwise, we're gonna. I mean, we can just have a 2-pack, just you and I. But I think that there needs to be a third. There needs to kind of, someone to take the heat off of us. But it's just saying. All right, number 4. This one from Pat Smash Good, asking question for Hayden. Do you think belittle minnowism could be a problem for constructed formats? It seems always correct to play it, and if it's not correct, it's more beneficial to change your deck so that it works rather than leave it out.
I kind of disagree with the last bit. Shout out to Pat. I like Pat. He's a good egg. But I kind of disagree with the last bit. I don't think it's necessarily beneficial to change your deck to include it, but I do think it is potentially a bit of a problem. I mean, the efficiency, the consistency of what that package does, and as we get more and more ways to make it good effectively, more cards to reveal that work well inherently in decks anyway, what it means is that you have this kind of plug and play aspect to it, where it just works with very little change. You look at the Viserai list, for instance, that I built. There's a lot of good ways to interact with it, right? Like, okay, I won't play red Shrill of the Skull form, but I'll play yellow and blue because they reveal to belittle, right? Like, there is definitely that aspect to it. So I do think it could be a problem. I mean, if you look at the Viserai deck, for instance, in some cases you're paying 1 for 7 damage with the minnowism, with the belittle, and the activation on Viserai that you wouldn't otherwise get. So it's pretty potent.
This one from Andy Modell at Frillior on Twitter, asking, is Sonata really worth the risk of whiffing without Skeleto?
Probably not. It depends. Sonata is inherently, I think, a strong card in Runeblades because it has the ability to be replacement level. So the more you can impact the replacement level ability of that card, I think Andy's asking about the Viserai list specifically, and the reason that Sonata's still in that list, or is in that list actually, is because of the blue count. So I played 22 blues in that deck. It has a reasonably high blue count for an aggressive deck, and so you can dump resources into Sonata to X equals 1 or X equals 2 and always have good rates of hitting and replacing the card. Plus you trigger Viserai, plus you deal arcane damage, which is amongst other things. So turns on Rosetta Thorn, for instance. So I think Sonata is still warranted in some decks, but it really does depend.
All right, this one's a little bit more personal, going off the board here a little bit, but how did you propose to Devin? And now this is curious because with the new information that we have that the two of you designed the ring together, it was clearly not, I would imagine, a surprising thing to be proposed to, but perhaps the method and the timing could have been a little bit surprising.
Oh, I'm going to get roasted for this. I'm a very practical person, Flake.
Did you send her a registered letter or something? Like, how did it happen?
Not quite. No, I think for us, we, post-COVID, COVID was like this, obviously just life-changing event for almost basically everyone globally, right? Like, it'll never be the same again. And I think for us, we kind of put our lives on hold a little bit, as so many people did. And I think at the start of this year, we really sat down and said, okay, like, what do we want to do? We live in a country for now half the time where we haven't been able to do the things we want to do, which, is unfortunate, but what do we want to kind of get out of the next stage of our life? And, I kind of just said to Devin, should we buy a ring? Should we should we do it? And then we did. So I mean, to be honest, the biggest thing, rather than the proposal or anything else, was like the journey that we went on to design the ring. We went on a trip to do this because the jeweler that we both love isn't in our city. So we flew up a couple of hours to the beautiful Sunshine Coast here in Australia to a jeweler and got the ring designed. So that was the big process for us, more than I guess what a proposal might be for other people.
So there's no getting on one knee and kind of.
I didn't know.
I'm telling you, just send her a text message at least. Like, what the hell? Like, I know.
Post-it note.
I was gonna say just left on the fridge. Just like, oh, by the way, it's literally, it says eggs, bread, milk, married? Question mark. Yeah. I love you, buddy, and I'm so happy for you guys. Nobody roast Hayden Dale because Hayden's awesome. So I won't fight you because, well, A, I'm in Canada, but B, I just don't fight people, and that's just the way it is. But you know who might fight somebody?
Likewise.
Dale and Mac, who has the next question. And this one I like because I want in on this, not as a participant, but as a spectator, possible commentator. Dalen says, if I was willing to pay the winner $100, could he beat Brendan in a 40-yard dash? And can it be recorded and posted on Arsenal Pass? I think that if ever there was an official Arsenal Pass Instant Speed Podcast collaboration, a foot race between you and Brendan might be the way to go. Funded by none other than Mr. Dale and Mac.
Unfortunately, for me, I think my knees are going to say no to that one. I have like just, I guess, joint pain from sport and things like that. But also, I think Brendan would have me in a race, to be honest. I'll give him this one. I think he's quicker than I am. But I did say I will challenge him to a 500-meter row, and I feel confident about that.
Well, at this rate, I think that it should be almost like a decathlon. Like there should be 10 events.
I'm okay with that.
I think that that's fine. Like, what if we did something like this? There's a pool. People submit. I'm just spitballing here. People submit their ideas of competitions, be it like rock, paper, scissors, rowing. There could be like physical, whatever, chess, whatever.
Oh yeah, I want mental as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then of all the things that are listed, there's like 20 or 30 listed, and then there's a draft where it's like each of you get to pick 5 things, and then that's what the competition is, and then we could turn that into like a series. I think that would be freaking awesome, and I think that should happen, and I hope that people who are listening who want to see this support this. So if you're listening to this, tweet at Brendan, tweet at Arsenal Pass, tweet at Hayden, tweet at me, tweet at everyone, tweet at the president, I don't care, but let them know that you want to see this, because I think that this is a good idea.
James White just starts getting added about a decathlon for 2 Flesh and Blood content creators. It makes no sense.
He's like, what the hell is this about? This is all right. But hey, $100. Dalen slamming it down. And if there are anyone else who want to inflate this prize pool, by all means, let's do this. So the final question of Go Again is, what is your first dance wedding song, and can I sing it? That's the question.
Oh, you can definitely sing it, of course.
Oh, heartwarming.
The first part's much harder a question. I don't know. I was thinking about this morning after I read your question. I hadn't thought about it before. Maybe something by The National, if anyone's familiar with The National. Big fan of their work, but I don't know, it's a tough question. I feel like you have to go on a journey and a process together to decide that, because it's very obviously very personal. It's obviously a very, even though it's only a minute or 2 minutes of your life, it's I guess it's pretty important, and people always look back at that. I've been told. So I think I'll have to put more thought into it. But my early thought is maybe something by The National.
When you say The National, I think of like the first thing that popped in my mind is like the national anthem. And then and we're like a day or two removed from July 4th, like the Independence Day in the United States. And I can only imagine how many people might if there's anybody in the world who would dance to the national anthem, it might be Americans. That's just my consideration. This is the first time in a long time that I have like non-Americans on the show, so feels good, buddy. Awesome. Hayden, I cannot thank you enough for doing the show again and for waking up early, which you said you already did, but I'm going to just pretend you did it for me. You're the man. Thank you so much. 2-timer. Your blazer is in the mail, my friend.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Flake.
No worries. And if anybody else wants to catch more Hayden Dale, more Arsenal Pass, give us your coordinates. And also, for those listening, if you want to bother Hayden Dale and, maybe, poke and prod him a little bit about the dancing, the wedding, the telegram he sent his fiance about his intention to get married, any of that stuff, how can they get in touch with you?
Twitter. Twitter's a big part of, I guess, my life because of the Flesh and Blood community, and I do try and respond to as many messages as possible. out there, especially when people are asking about the Viserai deck and things like that. I'm going to do a deck tech this week, so I know I've had a lot of questions about that. I promise I will get to that. I'm at Fian_Dale, like the tunic or like the tone, on Twitter. Of course, we have an amazing Discord community with Arsenal Pass. You can find us on YouTube. That's where we do a lot of our content, or Spotify, or whatever audio platform you like for our weekly podcast. But yeah, thank you to all of the Instant Speed listeners as well.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, I do recommend everybody. Again, we're all one big happy family. There's no competition here. We're all holding hands and singing Kumbaya. We love each other here. So, friends, thank you so much for listening to the Instant Speed podcast. Don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning, so keep playing the game. We'll catch you next week on ISP.
Well,